Earlier this week, the California legislature hit a deadline and sent almost 100 bills to the governor for his signature. Among the stack on his desk is Chelsea's law to toughen penalties against sex offenders. Do these tougher laws produce the expected results? With me to talk about that are David Rowland, editor of San Diego City Beat, and John Warren, editor and publisher of San Diego Voice and Viewpoint. So, John, Chelsea's law was named for San Diego teenager Chelsea King, who was raped and murdered by a sex offender. What would it do?
Well, I think the most outstanding thing about it is that it makes life imprisonment without the possibility of parole the end result of a conviction for such a crime against a child. And I think that's the big part. A lot of what we're looking at was already on the books. And, of course, it adds to this situation of what do we do with these people. But that is the major ingredient, that things are tightened up in terms of how we handle them.
Right. Now, we already have one law on the books. It's already been named for another sad story teenager, Jessica's law. It's in effect. How has that tightened restrictions on sex offenders?
Well, a major provision of Jessica's law, which was passed in 2006, is that it restricts parolees who have been released from prison for sex crimes. It restricts where they can live. It says they can't live within 2,000 feet of schools and parks and things like that. So that has had the unintended consequence of making a lot of people homeless. All these parolees who are coming out of prison who can't live close to schools and parks, there's really not very many places where they can live. And so there has been basically a 6,000% increase in homelessness among sex offender parolees.
But, John, some people find it hard to sympathize with the plight of homeless sex offenders. How might homelessness contribute to the risk to society?
Well, it does so in a number of ways. First of all, it makes tracking of these individuals even more difficult because they don't have fixed addresses, number one. Then we know that it adds to a sense of stability, which brings on increased mental illness and possibilities of repeated offenses because they're unstable and they're out there. So that adds to it. So the consequences are increased in terms of the people being without supervision.
So do you think that now that we know there are unintended consequences, which, by the way, was written about in San Diego City Beat, that we might see some changes, that maybe the author of the bill of Chelsea's law or Jessica's law might make some changes?
Yeah, it's important to note that that Chelsea's law, while like as John said, it increases prison terms and it also increases parole terms. So without amending Jessica's law, you have a situation where you're, in some cases, extending parole to certain offenders for life, which can mean that you are creating this instability that John talked about for somebody's whole lifetime. Now, Nathan Fletcher, the assemblyman who basically crafted Chelsea's law, understood a lot of these things, but he was not able to amend Jessica's law. He said he would have liked to, but he said he couldn't get the kind of traction that he needed from Governor Schwarzenegger.
Right, but I understand that this may be in the courts now, and we may find that the residency requirements are stayed, if not completely nullified.
That's right.
So on another issue still unresolved this week by the legislature and the governor is a plan to reduce the state prison population, but local officials are expecting a major impact on county jails. John, what's the basic reason that the state is looking to reduce its prison population?
Well, you have two things happening. The state is under a special master in terms of reducing the prison population, which is approximately 160,000 people. They've contracted some of this out to other states, federal governments, private entities, but they're looking at now putting some in the counties, because in San Diego County, for instance, we have approximately 1,000 or 800 beds that are not being used. And there's a question now, do we accept the people coming from the state, which would reduce the numbers, or will this become a part of the early release program? Because there are two different issues here, early release as opposed to housing some serious offenders. and we're very concerned about what the impact would be on county resources.
Yeah, and that concern was actually reiterated by the sheriff, Bill Gore, and the supervisors. Why are they concerned about having state prisoners housed in county jails?
Well, I did some reporting on this last year when we were talking about reducing the state prison population, and at that time, the state considered San Diego County jails to be at 113% of capacity, meaning over capacity. Now that's using the state's assessment of how full these jails should be. This recently, Bill Gore has said, well, we're a little bit under 5,000, and that's about capacity. So the problem here is if you add hundreds of new inmates into the county jails, you've reached that capacity, which not only brings up funding issues, but it also brings up possibly the same kinds of issues that they're dealing with at the state in terms of the kind of cruel and unusual punishment when you don't have adequate care and adequate room for people who are housed in these facilities.
David has an interesting point. I mean, that prison population in the local county jails could shift one way or the other depending on how many people are sent to jail at one particular point. So can we really count on an undercapacity for a long time?
Well, no, we can't, because on the first day of the early release program, and when it first started, San Diego County released over 260 people who were nonviolent offenders or who were short-timers, and yet we have people coming through the system each day. So we're looking at it from the standpoint, anything the state is trying to give us in this budget crisis is not going to add to our revenue, it's going to cost us. And if we take all that they give us, then we won't have space for the people that we have normally coming through the system as a matter of attrition.
Okay, so briefly, we're talking about money, right?
Monies.
But isn't it all public funds? It's all taxpayer money. What's the difference whether it comes from the state or comes from the county?
That's a great point. I mean, we have a situation like in the city of San Diego, which can't afford its pension system. A lot of people have heard about that. The state can't afford its criminal justice system, given the amount of revenue that comes in. So whether you're talking about the state prison system or the county jail system, you're right. It's all public money, and we don't have enough of it.
And we don't have enough. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. David Rowland, John Warren.